Hello, Search here from the Backyard Driving Range. All right, we have a question that came in today, and it's from Neil Whitman, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Okay, that's the nice town over there just across the river from Charleston, South Carolina. And he says, I've been a peak performance fan for about 3 years and have seen a nice improvement in my game. When things go wrong, it's usually from falling back on old habits of the rotational swing. My question regards warming up before a round. What's a good routine for the PPG swing? Okay, good question, Neil. I think number one, I think that probably the best thing would be is try to do some stretching at your home before you even get there. But again, if you haven't been able to do that, you definitely should do some stretching when you get to the golf course. Now, basically, anybody that's been to a golf school or even had a private lesson with me, many of the times I'll start off a lesson with them, and I just want to show that what basically I do. My office is right upstairs over there. It's in DJ's old bedroom, and many days I'm going to be there from early morning to mid-late afternoon. And in the summertime, when it doesn't get dark till 9 o'clock, I might just come down for dinner, and then eventually I'll get out to the golf course. Basically, I'm going to give you my startup routine when I get there. I'll get to the course. I'll get my clubs out of my truck, and I'll walk up to the golf shop, check in, see which tee they want me to go to, 1 to 10, and then I'll just go up to the tee and I'll put my bag down like this, and then I'll just start off. And sometimes while I'm walking up, I'm going to start stretching my shoulders out. I just do this about 5 or 6 times, backwards and then forwards. Then I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to go like this on both sides a couple times and really stretch out. A lot of times I can hear some cracking back there. Then once I get those done, I'll just usually stand here and go down and touch my feet to the ground, my fingers to the ground. Put my hands behind my legs and try to straighten them up a little bit more and really get a feel for stretching my hamstrings. Then many times when I'm done, I'm just going to pick my feet up and really kind of straighten my leg out, not lock it, but maybe come close to locking, and stretch each one of those, which now I can feel my calf stretching too. Normally when I get from there, I might just stand here and just take my arms like this, let the breath out and really stretch. That's when I find out that my shirt's too tight, and I need to pull my shirt up a little bit, because if your shirt's too tight, it's going to be tough to lift your arms up. So this is the great one when I always find out if my shirt's got the right amount of freedom, shall we say, looseness and freedom in it. Then sometimes I'll stand here and I'll get correct, and I'll just put my feet up here and do that and stretch everything out, and I can do that with both legs. And then ultimately, if being on a tee, I'll take my driver out. And then I'll do some really big stretches right here with the club over my back. Sometimes I'll go down like this, and then I'll use it to go this way again. Then I just tee it up. I just reach in here and tee it up. And I'll take 2 or 3 practice swings. Hopefully this tee will stay on the ball will stay on the tee. Let me get the short tee. I'm going to move it up a little bit closer. And I'll just take a couple practice swings. It's a little bit hard here. I'm a little tight in here. And I'll get it right. Then I just walk up to the ball and hit it. And normally, 95% of the time, it's dead down the middle. That's all the stretching I need. Now, ironically, I had a student one time. His name was Albin. When he showed up for lessons, or I went and played with him a few times, he'd always walk up to the tee, the practice tee or the first tee, or at the range before he warmed up. He'd take out his 3-wood and he'd just start swinging. He'd start hitting balls with his 3-wood. Kind of lazy swings, starting off lazy and moving on. I said, "Why do you do that, Alvin?" He said, I find I get a better stretch with it than starting with wedges. He said, "I can really feel it straightening out my arms more. I can feel the bottom of the swing better. I can feel the swing coming up." And I said, "Well, why don't you use a driver?" He said, "Well, because I start hitting it off the ground. Plus, I think, as we know, back in those days, back in the 90s when I worked with Albert, he was the the plates on the bottom of your fairway woods were brass versus aluminum or something, so they were heavier, so you could get a better feel of the club straightening out your arms coming through impact. But I think that was a pretty good idea. But the big thing is the stretch. I mean, there's some of the guys that go in the locker rooms on a PGA Tour. They have the trailer. Many of the guys go into the trailer and get stretched out in the trailer. I think the most famous one is Miguel Angel Jimenez. He gets on the range and he does something. I think, again, I'll get the wood out. He gets his wood on the ground. He stands himself like this, and he's doing all kinds of things like this with his hips and everything else. And sad to say, one tournament when they were showing him, and it was really cold, and they had jackets on there and else, and he was doing that, and some of the announcers were actually kind of making fun of him. And I'm not saying to myself, you got to be kidding me. Here's a guy that's like 49 years old now. I've seen him stretching in the locker room, and I'm going to tell you what. I mean, some of the things he was doing was amazing. I mean, almost borderline possibly being a contortionist. And that guy is doing all of this stuff, and he's flexible, and he's at 49 years old and still playing great golf. I mean, I think in the last major, the PGA, he was in there right to the very end of the last day to win that thing. So, I mean, he's definitely fit and supple. And so that's what it's all about, because the more supple and fit you are, the less chance you have of getting injuries, especially when you use the limited turn peak performance golf swing. Because we know the big turn is what causes all the stress, especially in the lower back and a lot of the other parts of the body, because we're not designed to turn that much. So one other point I just want to bring up is that many times in lessons, private lessons or even at schools, I'd have men, especially men, say to me, "Could you explain this to me?" He said, "I get to the golf course, I really don't have time to go to the range, and I just go to the tee and I tee it up, and maybe the first hit's bad, but I start hitting the ball really good the first 2, 3, 4, 5 holes, and then all of a sudden my swing falls apart. Why does that happen?" And I said, "Okay, well, what seems to happen once you get to when it starts falling apart?" I said, "Would you consider that you finally reached the point where you're nice, loose, and limber?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you feel like once you reach that point of nice and loose and limber, you now start saying to yourself, okay, now I can go get this bad boy and beat this ball?" And he said, or get more aggressive, whatever term you want to use for it. And they say, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, there's your answer. When you walked up to the tee and you hadn't stretched, you were tight. And so when you were tight, you were keeping everything together. You weren't making as big a turn. You weren't swinging the club as long. You weren't getting as deep, and everything was more controlled. And then once you finally started feeling like you got things stretched out and you could go at it, once you started going at it, then everything started going helter-skelter. And the movement got so big and so great in terms of your rotation, the length of your swing, and your follow through. I guarantee you, I bet you you start having more balance issues and all that other stuff, because you went from basically close to a peak performance golf swing to more of a big turning swing. I'm not going to call it rotational. It still could have been vertical, but either way, once you start letting too much leg movement happen and everything else, remember, quiet knees. The knees are the bees. Too much knee action, you're going to get stung. And so all of that happens, and the whole thing just falls apart because there's too much movement. So stretching is great. It wouldn't even hurt now and then during the round to if you feel yourself getting a little bit tight, stretch. I think another important issue is if you start and the weather starts to change, like gets very cool or the wind really comes up, and especially if you've been sweating, you might want to always have a vest in the bag to keep to put on to whether it be a sweater vest or a short sleeve windbreak or whatever, to keep your back warm. Because if you've been sweating and your back starts getting chilly, it's a high probability your muscles start tightening up a lot more. So I always got that. I always want to keep my back warm. Many times, even in lessons, people see me saying, I say, "Wow, you cold?" I said, "No, there's just enough of a breeze here where I want to keep my back warm, so it can avoid any issues with the muscles tightening up." So it's all about flexibility, suppleness, but just because you might be real flexible and supple doesn't mean it gives you a license to make a bigger turn. Because once you turn too much and you get turning into the sacred burial ground, you got to get out, and that's out and across and over, and you're going to end up over there. The peak performance swing is the limited turn only to the toe line in the backswing with the forward arm, and over to the toe line and up with the trailing arm. And it's a limited turn, and the more supple and flexible you are, the more important it is to maintain the peak performance golf swing, the wide knees outward pressure to control the turn, because on, square and solid only happens when we swing in the mitt and up the tree, and in the mitt and up the tree and to the finish. So peak performance swing is critical for everybody, because as long as you're a human being and you're trying to play golf, your arms only swing in front of your body, and you keep it in front of your body, with a limited turn and swinging vertical. All right, so flexibility, suppleness is great. Don't forget to do some at home. Get to the gym and do it. But if you haven't done any yet, you really need to do something when you're getting ready to tee off, and at least stretch a little bit, and it reduces the probability of you creating too much tension, stress, and strain, and likely possibly tearing or pulling some muscles. All right, so that's it for the search for today on trying to be more fit, because fitness with the Peak Performance swing takes it to another level, so you can play better golf with a body-friendly swing and shoot those lower scores. That's it for the search for today, and I'll be talking with you all again soon.